Hey, this is Phil Swift, and welcome to Destreza episode 3. We have a lot going on in this episode, and this is jam packed with a bunch of drills and new information for those. Now, if you haven't seen part 1 and part 2 yet, please feel free to go ahead and do that. This will help you understand everything that's going on in part 3. Part 1 was mostly theory, part 2 was the cuts, the guards, and a little bit of footwork. Part 3 is mainly the putting everything together. I'll be showing you a few of the offline movements, like using shifted steps to do your curved or diagonal. We're going to be breaking a few of the terminology up and adding some new ones as well, just to help people understand things a little bit better. Mainly for episode 3, I'm trying to give you guys all the tools that you need to continue on your own. Now, this is filmed all during the COVID crisis, so I don't have any partners to work with. This is just teaching myself Destreza and sharing it with everybody here as well. Thank you for everybody who has helped me get this far. Thank you for the folks in Spain, especially Jordi. He's helped me a lot with some of the interpretations. The author of the book, John, thank you, John, too. He's been a huge resource for us. All right, review and revision. So, a couple of things that I want to mention, mainly the first and second guard. A friend of ours, I'm sorry if I butcher your name, Jordi Creus, from Spain. He gave us some tips. He said his maestro showed him the better versions of guard 1 and 2. Granted, now I do guard 1 sort of bigger, wider. So I try to copy, the book. And so, he tells you to keep your hilt at ear level, and in order to and have the 6th or the 7th position grade of the blade to be directly under over your head. So in order for you to do that, you would have to kind of open up the arm quite a lot. Now the problem about this is, if I get attacked up here and I parry it and they disengage under, I have a huge opening right here, and in order for me to parry that, I would have to move my arm quite big, like quite a long motion for me to parry that disengage from underneath. Now, I believe, I don't know what it looks like, but Jordy was saying that that you in order to protect yourself against disengages, you can make this parry tighter. And in order to make it tighter, he was saying that you should bring the hilt up to about shoulder level, and then the blade will protect everything that's in the superior zone, just from that. And from here, if they disengage, all you got to do is just turn the wrist, and then you can go into a different parry. Now, granted, I don't have space right here to show you that, but the same goes with parry 2, I believe. So I was doing parry 2 sort of like this. I'm assuming you can also do it down here, hilt instead of ear level, hilt at shoulder, versus hilt all the way at ear. So those are some of the revisions that are not quite revisions, but some tips that I wanted to share with you guys. Another thing is Matt McPeak from Michigan, or Lansing Longsword Guild. He was saying that on the note that maybe we should start off the Roworth way, which is when you're doing your drills with your partner and you're in an on guard position, instead of positioning yourself, sort of, well, in the book he shows you guard 3 and 4 to be pretty far out, sort of like, inside guard will be far out like that, and outside guard will be pretty far out. So instead of going further out, I was thinking maybe you start off in the on guard position the Roworth way, towards that side, like so. I'll point, if my hilt is on the left, I'll point my point at my opponent's left eye instead, and vice versa. Right, if my hilt's on my right, I will point my point to my opponent's right eye. So now Matt was saying that perhaps you're striving for that position uh, so that you have the stronger um, position, so the stronger guard, I'd like to say. Let's say, for example, we start an engagement on the outside, right? So Roworth's way would be like this. So one of the partner would essentially put themselves in this kind of position, pointing at the opponent's right eye. And you, as the student or the person who's going to perform the attacks, or the or person who's going to win in the drill, will essentially start in Jaime's outside guard. So you're striving for that, I guess, a tahoe, or you're striving for that guard to be superior than your opponent. Not necessarily in a tahoe. I'm sorry for that, but that's what you're sort of striving for. All right, so next off we have the essential cutting drill. You can do this for warm-ups, or just doing this to remember all your cuts as well. So Roworth has his 6 cuts. So it starts from the right to the left. You got 1, 2, then 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I like to think I've reversed this drill and tailored it to Jaime's guards and cuts. So, for instance, instead of starting from right to left, you will start left to right. So the cuts will start off as a revez. So you'll start off revez 1, tahoe 2, then you come back up 3, 4, and then 5, 6. 5, 6 are just your slices. So you're just going to mainly use your wrist, movements in the wrist only. Now, we'll be practicing this drill throughout the 3 planes. So you're going to do it 3 times. However, the difference is, from the superior plane, you're going to cut all 6. And then the middle plane, you're going to cut all 6 again, so the slices and all. But the last plane, which is the inferior plane, you're at the bottom. Technically, you wouldn't be slicing his knees, so you want to just do the first 4 cuts. Now, I like to start my first cuts bigger, so I'll use the first circle of the arm, or the biggest circle, and I'll use my shoulders, my elbow, my wrist, everything. I'm just going to make these really wide movements for the cuts. It's not really practical, but it's mainly just a warm-up. You're trying to warm up your shoulders, trying to warm up your elbow and your wrist. We're going to essentially go through the same towards the 3 planes, but the difference this time is we're just going to try to use the wrist. So we're going to try to make our movements a little bit smaller, and that way our cuts will be more efficient. So just extend your arm, and just using your wrist only, you're going to cut all 6 to the first superior plane, all 6 to the middle plane, and just 4 to the bottom plane. So the thrusts of third, essentially starting off in your third guard, what you're going to do here is we're going to break things up into 3 motions. So the first motion is extending your arm from third into the thrust. So you're just going to extend the arm. Second, you're going to push off your back leg. So all the pent up energy on your back leg, you're going to use that energy, and you're going to push forward, not upwards, forward. Okay, and your front foot, what you're going to do is you're gonna brace all that impact with your heel and then your toe. It's about a 3-foot lunge. So from your back foot to your front foot, it's about 3 feet in between, space wise. So it's not a deep lunge. And then the last step, coming backwards, uh, essentially what a lot of rapier fencers do is they move back what's called the vita. So a lot of sources tell you when you recover to move back the vita. The vita is essentially your life. So that would be your heart, your body. I guess that's what was called the vita. So think of it as you're taking your body and you're bringing it backwards. Okay. So the thrust of fourth. The thrust of fourth is fairly simple. You're going to start off in the fourth guard, and then what you're going to do is you're going to extend your arm out to the thrust of fourth. Now, if you look at the illustration in the book, you will see that the tip is actually lower than the guard or the hilt. So when you extend your thrust, you want to bring that hilt or that knuckle bow up so towards like your head level, so that it protects your head from incoming riposte or a cut during the time that you thrust. So you could, for instance, you can counter a cut with that thrust. The format of the lunge is still the same. You're going to extend your arm first, then you're going to take your step, heel toe into the lunge, and then you're going to bring your vita back to recover. Now, the thrust of fifth, I like to start it in the outside guard. And from the outside guard, I will turn into the thrust of fifth, which is nails towards the outside. So as I make my turn, I will, what I'll do is I will extend my arm, and then I will take my step and then recover. Now, I have to admit, um, the illustration had the hilt slightly higher up to protect the face. I believe my hilt is just a little bit too low here. It should be at head level, and the tip would be pointing near the chest around the solar plex area. So I needed to bring my hilt slightly higher. What you want to do is, starting from the inside guard uh, with against your opponent, he wants you to disengage nails up and then thrust with your nails up. Now this is would be like a thrust in fourth, but the difference is as you extend, just before you hit your opponent or when they make the parry, you turn nails down. So for instance, it would be a disengage, nails up, and then as you extend to thrust, you would turn your nails down and then thrust. So on an engagement on the outside, to disengage and thrust in the thrust of fourth, you're engaging the opponent on the outside, and what you're going to do is you're going to disengage nails to the inside, and then as you thrust and extend your arm, you will turn nails up and then thrust. But technically, you're better off, and in the illustration in the book, it's not quite nails up. It's more like this, angled upwards. So you want the knuckle bow to be angled upwards, and then that knuckle bow and the fort will protect your head when you thrust. Okay, so making sure that you bring this up to head level and then have the point downwards like that. So in this section, we're going to put everything together that we've learned so far. So the footwork wise, all the positions, the cuts, the thrust. We're going to try to put everything all together in one drill. And the thing about any type of fencing is it's never just one person does a cut and then they win. So if you're facing against skilled opponents, there'll always be a back and forth. We go through all the options of riposte that you can make from each individual parry. We're just going to start with lunges and then recover back into position 2. Parry 1, we can taho to opponent's parry 2. You can also thrust of 3rd or 5th over or under the opponent's sword is what Jaime says. You can also do a chop to 1, taho to 2 or 4, and lastly an ascending cut to 2 or 4. From the second parry, our riposte options are a revez to 1, thrust of 4th, a chopped to 2, revez to 1 or 3, ascending cut to 1 or 3. For guard 3, we have the taho to opponent's 2, or thrust of 3rd. We also have a chop to 1 or 2, ascending cut to 2 or 4, and lastly the thrust of 5th. Now for parry 4, we have the revez to 1, the thrust of 4th, the chop to 2 or revez to 3. We also have an ascending cut to 1 or 3. And from the 5th parry or 5th guard, we have the thrust of 3rd. We have the taho to 2 or 4. And lastly, we have the thrust of 5th. For parry 6, we have the thrust of 5th. And we have taho to 2 or 4. For the 7th guard, we have the thrust of 3rd or attached thrust of 5th. We also have the taho to opponent's 2 or 4. Now for the 8th guard, we have simply just a taho to 2 or 4, or vertically straight down. And lastly, guard 9, we have the revez to 2 or 3. The last two parries are simply quite easy because you're essentially in a position to just riposte immediately with a taho or revez. Now, I'd like to complicate this drill furthermore by essentially, instead of just your lunge and recover back into position 2, we're gonna work on equilibrium, so shifting weight forward and backwards. And how we do that is essentially after your lunge, you want to turn your hips like you turn your hips for the slips. You're essentially turning your hip clockwise so that your hips square out, and that naturally brings you back. So it makes you naturally want to sit on your back leg. Basically what we're going to do now is we're going to do the whole drill over with just shifting your weight. We're also going to try this riposte and parry drill with slips as well. So instead of going back to position 2 or shifting your weight back and forward, we're going to try this with slips instead. So I like to start with a slip first, with my parry, then go into one of the cuts. And then here it's going to be a little tricky. You need to make sure that you put all of your weight on your back foot. It's been quite the struggle. Thankfully, I had lots of people to help me out. Thank you, everybody in the Destreza Saber group, for your contributions. Again, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to post it in the comments, and feel free to join the Destreza group. I'd love to hear your input, love to hear what you think. If you'd like me to go through anything else, feel free to let me know. Again, this might be the last episode. There's just a few other things I could cover, like conclusions or feints, but it's really tough to do that without a partner. Feints I could definitely do without a partner, but honestly, J Mass just recently posted a video on how to feint, so I would definitely check that out. He's a way better saber broadsword fencer than I am. Again, I am just new into this, and this is sort of my journey that I've showcased to everybody here on how I taught myself saber. So thank you for watching. Again, subscribe if you haven't, and yeah,